Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's Lunch and Learn on how do you want to start a podcast. Thanks to Jay and Muriel from the Content is King podcast for hosting today's Lunch and Learn. If you have any questions throughout the session, if you want to pop it into the chat box or keep it to the end and we'll have it in person Q&A then at the end. So I'll pass it over to Jay and Muriel if you want to fire away.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate it. Thank you for having us as well. Thank you to Republic of Work who do sponsor the podcast.
Yeah.
And give us the use of that amazing studio. So we appreciate it.
Amazing. I'm going to do a little bit of trickery while Jay talks over me.
The joys of technology, lads. So we're trying to get this presentation on the second screen.
Yeah, it's a common.
So today we're going to it's kind of a beginner's, if you want to start a podcast. We're not going to dive in too deep. You can let us know at the very end if you do want kind of an intermediate course after this. I'm sure we can do something.
Mm-hmm.
But this is literally bare bones. If you want to start a podcast, to drag it over to the screen.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, cheers, Miriam.
Yeah,
thanks, Miriam.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
Just mansplaining there to you. So this is just press the square, Miriam.
I'm waiting for the arrow to appear, Jay.
Right. So if you've listened to our podcast before, you were used to this kind of banter between two of us. We find that to us, like that's our friendship, and that's what works between two of us.
Mm-hmm.
A year and a half ago, I went to you randomly. I met you briefly. I saw your social. I said, I like this girl. She's very funny. Let's talk about a podcast. And then between 20 minutes, I think we talked, and then we had a podcast.
Pretty much.
And here we are, 65 episodes later.
I know. We're almost 2 years into our podcast journey.
Yeah, 25,000 downloads plus, like just nearly 10,000 followers across social media, which is class.
Yeah.
We're going to jump to the next thing. So what? Sorry, say Muriel is doing his one. Sorry, go on.
Okay, so today we're going to keep it kind of short and sweet, and then we're going to have a lot of time for questions as well, because I know that some of you that are watching, listening might be kind of thinking, maybe not right now that you're going to start a podcast, maybe it's something that you might be thinking about doing in the future. So we're going to start off today with why podcasting is for you, to kind of show you a few statistics of, I suppose, the popularity of podcasting and kind of where it's going. Then we're going to go into finding your niche, because we all know that, to have a successful podcast or even anything, you need to find the topic that suits you and your niche. So we'll get into that. Then we're going to get into knowing your audience. So just understanding your audiences, their behaviors, their needs, and what they look for when they're listening to podcasts. Then we'll go into formats and style. There's a lot of different types of podcasting that maybe you may not know about. And then we're going to walk you through some tools as well that you can use to get started as well. So just a brief introduction into myself and Jay. Oh my God, we're wearing the same clothes as the photo. What are the chances? We didn't take that today right before this. So my own name is Muriel Foley, and I'm the owner of a digital marketing consultancy called MGFD. So I specialize in everything digital marketing, and I work with clients across the globe, across a suite of different products and needs and services. I live and breathe digital marketing, and I've been working in it for 11 years. 11 years. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. And Jay?
My name is Jay Woodard. I'm the creative director and owner of Ad 32 Productions. I've worked with a few people here on the call already. So what we specialize in is we're a content agency. So we create content for SMEs, large corporates, this kind of stuff. So it's mainly videography, photography, branding, and podcasts. So that's what we focus on. We're based here in South Malin, Cork. And yeah, super fun. I'm in it for a long time, studied filmmaking in college, and this is where I am now.
This is where we are now.
So just some stats on the actual podcast. 25,000 plus downloads. Our demographics 23 to 44. We always found our audience quite interesting because it is like kind of 50-50-ish, 50% males, 40% female, and 2% non-binary. Our biggest audience is Ireland. Our second biggest is the States, and then the UK. The States from TikTok, believe it or not. We got a massive following from the States because of TikTok clips.
Yeah.
And then UK is after that. And then there's a few scattered Australia, a few other things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. And I tend to find that sometimes your audiences can reflect you. So you probably even find that for your own business, that a lot of the following can sometimes reflect like your own demographic. So I think for us, because it's like 50%, it kind of makes sense that way as well. So I'm going to walk you through the kind of why you should podcast, right? So we are going to throw some stats in there. Thanks, Jay, for bringing along the stats. So it shows that 54% of podcast listeners are much more likely to consider buying from a brand after hearing its advert on a podcast. So with a lot of podcasts, and I know that some people have asked, can you make a passive income from a podcast? Like, how do you monetize it? And sponsorship is a big part of that. So if you do, start building and growing your podcast, try to think about even like sponsors that would make sense for your brand. You can approach them, maybe have some little sponsorship packages ready to go. And that's how you can kind of get that little bit of income going for yourself, but also for your listeners, if you try to think about having a sponsor that makes sense to your brand. So obviously for myself and Jay, Republic of Work is one of our main sponsors, and that makes sense to us because we both, work from here. We both believe in remote working, as well as, working in kind of hubs like this and facilitating things like podcasting and stuff. So it just makes sense for both of us to work alongside someone like that. So it is, people will trust what you're saying because, you have their full attention, and they're much more likely to follow brands than on their social media sites. So some people think that if you have to bring people to the podcast, but sometimes the podcast actually brings people to you. So if you have, we will get into more technical stuff like later on, but if you have your labeling right, if you have your descriptions correct, if you're selecting the correct category and niche for your podcast, people can stumble across you, and people are in discovery mode. So if they find your podcast, they mightn't even know what you look like or who you are. They might just like your content and then eventually find you on social media as well. But why you're here. So, it is always nice to continue learning. And sometimes, people don't necessarily consider or think that podcasting is actually a skill, but it is, because even if you create content all of the time on your social media channels and you're very comfortable speaking to camera, it's a whole other thing when all people hear is your voice, like tone, keeping it going, researching. Now I love talking, so I kind of don't struggle as much with that. But at the same time, it is a long time to be talking and keeping your audiences engaged, because it's just audio in most cases. So, maybe this summer you might be creating a little less content for your own social channels. You might be taking a little bit of a step back from that. And it is a good time to start maybe learning a new skill and learning how to maybe podcast, or maybe practice a couple of podcasts yourself as well. And also it allows you to go beyond, your current channels. So sometimes if you have, like, everybody here has an expertise, whether it's maybe a hobby that you have or a passion that you have, a skill that you have. And this is your way of showcasing your expertise beyond just maybe a video on social media. This is you going in depth into topics and having a listenership of people who are very interested. So they're highly engaged and highly targeted as well. So if that sounds like you, then you are 100% in the right place.
So finding your niche is absolutely key here, because when I said I want to start a marketing podcast, I knew marketeers, students, and then that's kind of it, isn't it? That we are, would you say that's our audience? Mm-hmm. Kind of marketing students, business owners who are into marketing, and then marketeers. So finding a niche is extremely important. So when you are planning your podcast, think about topics that you're passionate about, that you can speak for endless hours about, because that you will be speaking for endless hours about. You will be creating weekly content on all the subjects, so you need to keep it fresh. You need to keep up to date. Like, I think I check that website. We get our headlines for once a day. I actually have the daily email as well, because that's what I'm into. I'm seeing new stories. I send her stuff. She sends me stuff. Like, have you seen that? And we kind of give out to each other then, and the whole time. But if you want to, when you are finding your niche, you have to understand that you're taking these people's time. So you don't want to be talking about, let's say, fishing one episode, and the next episode you're talking about construction. It doesn't make any sense. Do you know what I mean? You need to focus on that, because the niche I'm losing myself here. It will disperse very quickly if you don't stay on track. They'll get annoyed. Obviously, the likes of Joe Rogan can do it because he's Joe Rogan and he has separate like 3 interviews a week, and that's what you're expecting. You're expecting different topics. But starting out, you need to find a niche and stick to it. So firstly, are you podcasting on your hobbies and interests, or are you podcasting your business? If you are doing your hobbies and interests, that's great. It's nice. It will kind of, the passion's really there, because sometimes business can be like, oh, I have to do this for business. But if you are passionate about it for your business, great. This is a great way to find new business as well. You can have like the likes of, let's say you want to speak to someone, but a CEO, but there's no way of getting to him because you're a small fish and they don't deal with that. But if you have them on your podcast as a guest, you have direct contact with that person, and it's a great way to build a relationship and build a business around that. And you can build a really good brand of podcasting as well. When you are finding your niche, niches are not fads. That's very important, because fads come and go. Like, what was the one we said? Love Island. So like Love Island at the moment is a fad. Everyone's talking about it, and it's great. And yes, there are podcasts about Love Island, but that will die off in, what is it, 8 weeks, 10 weeks?
7 weeks, maybe 6 weeks and 4 days. But
you can tell she's the
fan.
So do you know what I mean? So they might get 3 or 4 more episodes after that, but then again, they're on hiatus till the next season. They're not getting much, unless they get guests on here and there. But if you can find a niche instead of a fad, that would be amazing. Content is ongoing, so you will be putting out weekly things, the weekly podcast. No, it's up to you if you do bi-weekly or monthly. We would always recommend trying to do a weekly to get the audience building. It's always better. I came up with this line: longevity is king. Yes, queen. Because if you are in the niche and you're getting more experience, you're learning more, and with that learning, it always evolves into more information, more gathering of, bigger audience and more resources. So that will always grow when you are podcasting in a proper niche that you have. And research and planning is essential. It's like everything. If you're, what is it? Fail to plan to fail, whatever it is.
I wish you planned that.
I wish I planned that. But yeah, I know you have to research that kind of stuff. Just as I said, like myself and Muriel, before the podcast goes, we have our list of topics, we have our headlines that we've already seen ourselves throughout the week, and we've researched and talked about it. Because it is so intimate. You're in this person's ear for however long your podcast is. And if you're talking shite, they know you're talking shite. If you're waffling, they know you're waffling. And you just lose credibility. And that's a problem, So here are the top US podcast genres by reach. Obviously, comedy is huge. News, society, and culture. True crime, I never understood, but people love true crime. You love true crime.
I do.
Yeah.
You don't want to look at my recommendations for podcasts, because you'd be like, is she okay?
So as you can see, that's the list there. So if you feel like you fit under there, I think everyone kind of fits under there. We're a business podcast because we're marketing. But yeah, take a look there. What it will do is, well, if you have any questions after this about niches, or if you feel like your niche isn't there, do ask us questions and we can talk about it after.
Yeah. So I think like finding that niche is important, because then when you know what you want to talk about, then you can think about your audience, right? Because it's all well and good to be like, I'm going to choose this topic because I'm passionate about it. I feel like I have weekly content for it, and I know that I'll be able to get fresh research and kind of keep it going all the time. But you need to think about your audience, right? So before you even think about defining who they are, you need to think about what the goals are. So we had mentioned at the very, very beginning, are you podcasting because this is your hobby? You know, maybe you like to just talk about certain topics and you're just doing it for yourself. And that's totally fine. There's so many podcasts out there that are just there, maybe without sponsorship, that just exist because people are like, no, I really like to just talk about this. And then if people reach out and they just want to engage with me on these topics, that's what I love. But if you are a business and maybe your goals are, you know, building an audience in another region or expanding your horizons in terms of available channels, like we all know that social media can be finicky. It changes all the time. Whereas podcasting is kind of like radio. It's one of those kind of solid foundations that it won't ever really change in terms of like its structure, and people will always kind of like that white noise anyway. So if you are thinking about maybe goals for your business or your brand, it could be to maybe reach new audiences. Maybe it could be like that, expanding on your topics and growing kind of on these other channels. Because when you decide then what your goals are, is it that you want them to follow your social media? Do you want them to send you a message online? Do you want them to sign up to your database? Whatever it is, do they want to maybe buy your product or your service? Once you define what you want your audiences to do, then you can start looking at who your actual audiences are. So for most of you, when a business starts out or when a brand starts out, they're not going to be like, oh, the only marketing I ever want to do is I'm just going to start a podcast and that's it. I'm not going to create any socials. More than likely you have some sort of a foundation of audience. So you probably have, an email list, you maybe have client lists, you probably have a bit of a social media following. So look at who they currently are. And if these are the kind of people that you want listening to your podcast, then, you understand who they are. I mean, for any business or brand that's out there, you have done the groundwork on who your audience is and how you can reach them, maybe using social media, maybe using email marketing, whatever it is. So now you kind of have an understanding of who they are. Think about the type of trends, topics, and even styles that they like. So for me, I know that every year Spotify does that kind of, yearly roundup, right? And I love looking at people's stories of that, because for me, I like to see, especially people who would be maybe my audience for my business and brand. And I like to see what their top 5 podcasts are, because it might be, totally different topics, but then I might see a similarity in terms of styling. Is it that there's always 2 hosts? Is it a podcast that's broken up into different topics, different styles? And then I'll mimic that in terms of like, okay, so if I'm building this podcast for myself, I know that my audience really likes this style of podcasting, so I'm going to do that as well. But also use your channels for research. Ask your audiences, who do they like listening to? What length of podcast do they like? Some people like a short and sweet podcast. Some people like longer podcasts as well. So it's good to just even do your research that way in terms of surveys. But as I said, the structure of your podcast needs to mimic the actions you want them to take. So is it that maybe you're starting a section of your podcast where you need audience participation? So you need them to be messaging you before the podcast. So maybe you're saying, I'm going to put a question box up on Instagram. Maybe I'm going to start a little survey monkey on LinkedIn, whatever it is. And then just kind of do your research that way. So then you have a portion of the show where it's talking about people's questions or maybe people's thoughts on a certain thing. So always kind of mirror that. And maybe, you have the end of your podcast where you give the call to action as well. So think about that structure as well. But always remember that, for us, we have a big following of people in the US and a big listenership in the US, because podcasts can go beyond, your neighborhood, your locality. They can be found elsewhere, because if you know your niche, this is what I mean. If you think about the topics, the labels, the format, the style, somebody in another country could be like, oh, I love listening to their podcast. Then all of a sudden they recommend it to their followers, and then you have a big following in that area. Mm-hmm. So be mindful of that kind of worldwide following. And if your goals are maybe aligned with creating a database, maybe selling an online course, whatever it is, that can be sold virtually and online, then you could reach those audiences as well.
Mm-hmm. Just to jump into formats and styles, obviously our format is a multi-host. We're 50-50, where we just discuss topics back and forth. So whatever you find more comfortable with yourself, what you think starting off, you think you might need a co-host, so just look at that list there. So monologue, top left, is by far the hardest. I think you could do it. I don't think I could do it. I don't know if it's a compliment or not, but no, you can. But it's true. Like, so I work with a few different clients, and some do have their own podcast, and it's a monologue, and they're just fantastic speakers. They understand pacing, they understand the bumps in time, and it just clicks for them, and it works. Mm-hmm. And then there's the multi-host, which is our podcast where we're back and forth, we're talking, it's conversational style. Like, to me, it's safer. There's no dead air. It's always there's always opinions being thrown out. There's always conversation happening. Yeah. Interview is very like that as well, where one person will dominate the conversation by steering it, and then the other person will obviously answer. But it's just, when you are interviewing, make sure you have done your research, because again, not only will the interviewee think you're a tosspot for not knowing the information, but the listener will also go, what is this person doing, wasting both our times? So it is important to have the information research when you're interviewing. Mm-hmm. Roundtables are hard. I've done a few roundtable podcasts myself where I've hosted roundtables, let's say 4 people. It's hard to fit a conversation in because there's 4 voices, there's 4 opinions, the pacing, the time, everyone speaks over each other. So it's hard to understand. And there's times where I've said, sorry, can you leave him finish his point? And you have to control that scenario. Otherwise, everyone's going to talk to everyone. Points aren't going to get finished. And then the listener gets annoyed because all they're getting is loud noises in their ear. Narrative is like these true crime ones we were talking about. There's another amazing one called Business Wars, if you want to check it out. Phenomenal podcast. Again, it combines monologue and narrative and tells a story. So serial killers, that kind of stuff. And documentary would be kind of similar to narrative, where it's kind of behind the scenes, talking about how long the film took to make, what happened, lights blew up, the actor hated, this kind of stuff. You mean, it's quite a heavy production because there'll be a lot of research there. There'll be a lot of sound editing and design that have voiceovers, all kind of stuff. So they're the top kind of 6 podcast formats out there at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that like the beauty of a lot of this is that you could combine different styles as well. So you might decide to maybe do some solo, and maybe others you might have that kind of multi-host, like maybe bringing guest hosts in every week as opposed to an interview. And then like I agree with Jay, round table, like I've done podcasts before where it's me hosting and then having guests, and it is kind of interview style, but it's also round table. And I think that in that way, one piece of advice is that if you are having a guest or a host that isn't used to podcasting, like for example, this is a microphone, like they could talk to you like this. And then you kind of have to be like, just, you know, even like the fact that they're not used to having a microphone in front of them. Like I remember our first episode, I was absolutely terrified. Okay, I'm not going to lie, I was sweating so much in that chair, but I didn't like my mouth was like practically on that microphone because I just wasn't used to it. So, you know, if you are thinking about, I might actually do a podcast and have guests on it, great, but just brief them as well and make them feel really comfortable. But, you know, just say like, you kind of have to keep focused on the microphone, like try not to look at me like this. And there's just a few different variables that way. But we actually have I'm like, oh, we actually have slides on that. Sorry about that.
So as well, obviously if you're doing Zoom and stuff, you'll be able to control, like say, you'll be able to say, look, come close to your mic and stuff. But it's important to make sure that you actually want this person on your show or podcast. You're not having them on there just for the sake of having them, because the world is full of forced interviews. James Corden, and people have grown accustomed to ignoring them. Like you people just ignore forced interviews. You can tell both people don't want to be there. They're not going to bother. So you want your listeners engaged, but how are you going to be engaged if you're not engaged with your guest? God, that's a tongue twister, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Did I wrote that?
You did, yeah. But I think like that, you know, it has to, like you have to both have some sort of synchronicity. So I wouldn't just pick a podcast guest because they have a podcast and it's really popular. Like if you don't vibe with that person, and sometimes I really do like listening to podcasts where there is a difference of opinion. It's happened to us all the time where we disagree on things, but it becomes interesting as opposed to aggressive. So I would try to pick somebody similar if you were doing a collaboration or maybe a team up with somebody on social media. You'd want to think about their audience, and you want to make sure that their audience is similar to your audience, because that's who, like their listeners might listen to your podcast and vice versa. So it needs to be kind of mutually beneficial. But it is like that, you know, it is an intimate situation and you have like their undivided attention as well. So you need to make sure that you're as interested in the conversation as them, as opposed to you just kind of flaking off a list of questions and then being like, right, thanks very much for that.
Exactly. So wait that beat, wait that bump where they've stopped talking, where you're not just going with the next question because clearly you haven't listened, you're just asking questions and you're not actually listening to the answers. Do you know?
Yeah. So again, like this kind of, hey, look, who I've worked with in the past is a good thing to kind of think about. Maybe looking at people in your circles first who might be kind of good on like as a podcast, because if you just think I'll reach out to this big influencer, they could be terrible at podcasting. Like they could be really uncomfortable or like really like, oh God, I'm not used to this now. And they have a microphone in front of them and it's just hard. It's like anything when you point a camera at somebody who's really confident, and then you could point a camera in front of them and they could be like, oh, I don't know anymore. So I think it's very important to like look at your inner circle first.
But as well, I would have a conversation about that. Pure example, I had a guest on, quite a recognized name in the culinary world. I had him on my podcast. massive. I was a big fan of his, want to interview him. I got him on. And before we started rolling, gee, we had great conversations. We were talking about food and his life and how he got here and all the stuff. And the second I pressed record, his back went straight and he just shut down. I was like, oh my God. So my old podcast were about an hour long, 40 minutes conversation. That podcast was 15 minutes because I could not, I tried my best to get everything out of him. I couldn't. And by the end I was like, look, thanks a million. Thanks for coming in. So obviously I learned that, but I think you get a vibe.
Yeah.
Say, look, have you done podcasts before? Have you spoken? If they say yes, then you should know, okay. And even if you want to do a test sometimes.
Yeah, or even listen to previous podcasts that they've been on and just get a sense of what they're comfortable with. If they're the kind of guest that absolutely, you ask them a question and they go on and on and on, maybe you might have to reel that in at times as well. But I think what's on these slides as well is it's kind of for their benefit too. So if they're talking about a topic that maybe they wouldn't have come on their own channel to speak about, but if asked the question and given the opportunity to open up about something in that setting, they might feel more comfortable. And you can say, well, look, I'll be recording this podcast as well visually, so I can send you the clips, send you the recordings so you can use them on your own channel. So that can be appealing to certain people as well. And
not to scare you, but when you are doing this, when you have a guest on, you are juggling a lot of balls. You're the ringmaster. You're seeing if the level's okay. You're seeing if the conversation is moving smoothly. You have to seem interested, that you have to be interested. You have to have your questions ready. You have to see, right, that's peaking. You have to look. And then even in your head, in the background, when I'm doing it sometimes, I look at the clock and go, that was 32 minutes in. That'd be a good clip for social media. So there's always this kind of stuff going in your head as the host. So just be aware of that. We're going to jump into some tools here to get started. Now, obviously, some people are on here don't have a budget, which is understandable. So podcasting with no budget. Zoom or Instagram Live are very, very easy setups. So I'll get into the hosting after all that, but the likes of Zoom now lets you record for 40 minutes. Is it for free?
For free, yeah.
So 40 minutes is more than enough to have someone on like this, record the screen, record the audio. iMovie or iMovie or Garage to clip audio, that's Apple, or Audacity for PC. Again, these are very simple 1, 2, 3 edit by numbers kind of thing. You can also go to YouTube and see how to edit audio on Audacity or how to edit audio on iMovie. And a lot of them are just drag and drop and it's clipping. What you can do the Instagram Live as well as you can save them to your phone, and then either you can Google Drive them to yourself or AirDrop them to yourself, whatever system you're on. And then we use video for our podcast. So we have on YouTube and we use it for social clips. I just think it works better, doesn't it?
Yeah, some people like to watch. I know this sounds weird, right? But some people like to watch podcasts on YouTube.
Yeah.
It is a thing.
I did last night.
Yeah, you put it on and it's just the two guests or the two hosts or the host just speaking. And it's kind of for me, I do it too, where it's like white noise and it's there and it's on and it's like.
So it's like watching a talk show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you are doing it, you can take the video again and edit the clips in I think it's Movie Maker on PC, but iMovie and GarageBand. Sorry, iMovie for video on Apple.
Yeah, but you can do video editing on Canva now as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And if you are podcasting with the budget, get the next one over. Sorry, sorry about that. Sorry. You ideally you have the bones of €1,000, which would be great. If you don't, that's understandable as well. But so the Rodecaster Pro is a little board. You'll see it. Thomann.de, THOMANN.de is the best source for this kind of stuff over here. I think it's 3-day delivery. There's always deals. So the Rodecaster Pro is literally a little board with levels. You can plug your phone into it. You can do Bluetooth if you want to call someone instead of Zooming. You can literally do a phone call and it records for you. And then obviously the microphones you get. So I would recommend the Pod mic from Rode. How much that cost you?
Rode stuff, Rode is amazing. It's the best, it is the best brand for audio. I use the Blue Snowball is the name of it. I think this is now maybe 40 or €50. It has a cover on it but it comes as a stand. It comes with like an arm thing as well that you can like set up, and the quality of it is very good as well. And I use it for things like Zoom calls as well, so the quality of the audio is better, but that's kind of like a cheaper version as well if you wanted to go that way.
I think I got one as well on Amazon for like 60 or 70 quid, nothing crazy. And then Adobe Audition is the professional editing software if you do want to go in properly, deep dive into the audio and mess with the decimals and stuff. And that's about €25 per month for the suite. So that's podcasting with the budget.
Yeah. And I think just before we go into the hosting, like some people do start podcasting with their headphones mic.
Yeah.
And if you listen to podcasts done with that, like sometimes the microphone can drop and like hit off your lapel, or if you're in an echoed room, you need to kind of listen back to the audio quality that you're creating. So even podcasting with no budget, like try to at least kind of hold the mic up in the headphones so that it's not down here, so that it's more clear, and try to find like an area in your home or in the office or wherever it is that's very soundproof, because if there's any echo, like just think about the audio quality for the listener. They're not going to listen to that for 40 minutes.
I've edited podcasts where someone's done it in the kitchen and the kids are in the background, and it just, I'm like, chaos. Oh, jeez. But it's chaos. And soft furnishings, even jump in your closet if you have to. The amount of clothes in there will help. So hosting platforms, the Content is King platform, or the Content is King podcast is hosted on SoundCloud. I upload there every week, and then I take the RSS feed. This is getting a bit complicated, but we can go in depth after in another session if you want. What you have to do is you take the RSS feed and then share it to Spotify and iTunes, and then it automatically updates every week. You don't have to do it once. SoundCloud is €11 a month, which isn't bad at all. But as I said, so you can get the free 40 minutes on Zoom. If you look at the idea of, let's say, season 1 of your podcast is 6 episodes, do 30-minute episodes, and then SoundCloud is free up to 3 hours. So you'll get 6 episodes of your first, let's say, season 1 for free on SoundCloud and Zoom, if you go with Zoom, and then you'll know if it's worthwhile or not. Again, there's Podbean, there's Buzzsprout, there's Anchor. Anchor, a lot of people know from, because you can just record literally from your phone if you're just talking. And then there's Speaker and Audio Boom. So have a look at them, see what suits you best. Obviously, SoundCloud might be your thing. You might like Podbean or Anchor, but there's other ones as well. So do a bit of research on that.
So I think, like, in terms of our final thoughts, like a lot of people think that I feel like maybe podcasting is for me, and I feel like I have information to share. I feel like I'm a bit relatable to my audiences, and my voice sounds okay. It's not an annoying voice. I mean, don't say anything, Jay. But if you kind of think it might be something for me, but I feel like the main thing that holds people back is like, how the hell do I get it from my phone or from my computer to Spotify? And it's basically just making sure that you have a hosting platform. It's the same with a website. It needs to be hosted somewhere before it can go live. So once you kind of figure that part out, that's really the most kind of technical part if you are starting out. Obviously, if you're moving into more heavy production, like it might be worth having somebody that is like a podcast producer. And there is, like, they are there, like Jay is one, that we know loads of producers that maybe for your first few podcasts, you're like, I might actually just hire somebody so that the production quality will be exactly as I need it, or maybe just to help me as I start out. And then you can just go for it. Like, if that's really the only thing that's holding you back, then I would just go for it.
You can talk to Republic of Work as well and use the studio we use.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you are a brand or business, do think of the idea of launching a podcast, because even for your marketing strategy, this could be golden for you, where the podcast is 30 minutes each week, and that's your hero piece. You have that podcast, it's 30 minutes. But then you break it down into all smaller audio, video clips, like quotes, artwork, all the stuff. And you can literally schedule out from one episode, you could get easy 25, 30 pieces of content.
Yeah.
Easy.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to any questions. Feel free to follow our podcast or have a listen. It's called Content is King Podcast. And we've Jay's and myself's handle up there. So yeah, I'm going to attempt to
So if you want, guys, if you want to talk to us, and I'll just unmute yourselves there if you have any questions, and we can get the technical glitch over here now.
I'm like, I just want to, I'm trying to, it's on the wrong screen. Oh, wait. Anyway, we'll figure it out.
So do unmute yourselves there, guys. If you have any questions, shoot away there.
I think I might plug this out.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be back.
Screen.
We'll be back.
No.
Now. Beautiful.
In the question box.
Okay.
Technical remote questions in regards. Sorry, no. Nothing there. Thanks so much, great advice. So, guys, if you have no questions, oh, Jesus.
Do you have any advice for how to advise on? Oh, yeah. Guess on Zoom. Oh, wait, now. Did you see that one? Do you have any advice for how to advise on a non-technical remote guest on, say, Zoom in regards to getting the best audio?
So, as we said, if they can get into a soft room, be it a sitting room where there's carpets and rugs and couches, or if they can get into I know as you're going to ask your guests to jump into a closet, but something with soft furnishings that it's not marble flooring or tiles, it's not hard wood. If they have headphones, make sure to use the headphones. That would be great, because then obviously you're not going to get the echo as much.
And especially like that, if they are using their phone for the Zoom, to make sure that they're tilting it to the side and that they actually have it set up and propped up. Because if you are planning on using the actual recording of the Zoom, and you're making little clips out of it, you don't want them to be in like this blurry kind of weird place, or their handshakes, because that just doesn't make for good content to share. And
have a little techie setup if you want to do a 5-minute call before, a day or two before, just to see where they are. Like that you're not, or say, look, for the first 3 minutes of the call, we're going to get you set up. Can you get in a separate room? Can you do this kind of stuff? Don't be afraid of that, because obviously quality is better than whatever that is. Brian, shoot there. You have a hand up?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself there.
Hi. Great presentation, guys. Just wondering, regarding in your own experience, how much planning was done before you actually went and shot, or did your first, or testing was done, or kind of like your content is king? You said you met briefly, obviously you gelled, but that's all well and good. But I suppose you measure twice, cut once in relation to kind of actually going live. Did you have loads of episodes in the can and kind of tested them with, or you just freeball?
Yeah, that like that to Muriel, but that's my style of marketing. It always has been, is like literally run and gun, guerrilla style marketing. And I took the same approach to the podcast, where we literally had a 20-minute conversation. I said, I like your jib, I like the color of your jib, you're in. She's like, I want to be in. Great, thanks, Mill. And
then we went for it. Like, obviously we researched what we were going to talk about and had a structure to the podcast, but
we had an intro episode, I think, a welcome, like this is us, this is who we are. It's 15-20-minute episode. This is what we're going to be talking about. Next week we kick off. And then next week we just went.
But I think that's the thing. I think you can overthink things as well. You know, you can create something, listen to it once, and then listen to it again and be like, oh God, I don't like the sound of that anymore. And then you're going to start getting critical. Whereas I think if you feel like, I'm just going to put it out there and just see what happens, I think that's the best thing, because you're going to start overthinking, second guessing, and then probably not posting it.
Yeah. So we literally say after the podcast, happy with that? Yeah. Or like there might be a bit, we shouldn't have said that, we should cut that out. Like we very, very rarely cut stuff out of our podcast. Very rarely.
Yeah.
But if it's like, we shouldn't have said that, or this kind of thing, a client might have heard that kind of thing. I mean, other than that, everything goes out. It's just cut and it's put out publicly, you know?
Can I ask, just not to hog the time here, how much time do you devote each week to it? So with regard to preparation, planning, and then implementation?
So as I said, like planning for us, I think, because we're in this, sorry, one. What is it?
Editing as well, of course.
Oh, yeah. So in this, like we're in this world, we're both marketeers, so we look at this stuff. I get daily updates, as I said. Muriel's always look at daily updates. So that's kind of our research that we just want to come on and talk about it. We do maybe 25 to 30 minutes to 40, 50 minutes in the studio.
Yeah.
We have an hour booked every week in the studio with a public work. And then for me after, it's about an hour and a half to 2 hours. It all depends on the editing was.
Yeah.
How many clips we want to put out. So it's about an hour to edit down. And then if I'm doing like just promotional clips, it's about 2 hours. So realistically, it's 3 to 5 hours a week.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Do you know?
I think so.
Let someone else. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a million, Brian. Anyone else there, guys? Any questions?
So I think that any questions to do with Republic of Work, that Colin said you can pop him an email at colin@republicofwork.com.
Yeah, if you do want to book the space or
specifics. I'm pretty sure that if you did want to come in and trial like one time using the studio, I think that is available. I don't want to speak for Republic of Work, so I'll let Colin do that. But yeah, I think it's definitely worth like that coming in. Like for us, we have like the mics are already set up for you, like everything is there. It's just basically showing up and having your research done.
And there's a very good chance you'll be working with me. So like we bring people in, we go through everything, we sit them down, we talk about what their plan is, how they do it, and go from there. And like the likes of, if you are a business or brand, it's a very smart move. Like even the likes of Jameson now have released a podcast series where I think it's 3 episodes, it's a 20-minute episode, and it's just the history of Jameson. And it's a narrative style where it's just telling the history of the brand and stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of CEOs as well for companies doing a weekly podcast instead of an internal memo, where it's actually a 10-15-minute podcast for all their employees. Like I produced the credit unions podcast. And again, like that, it's an internal podcast for the credit union where all their members of staff are up to date with the latest deals, the latest offerings, the latest whatever it is. And it's very cool. Like it's very up to date for credit union, to be honest.
Trisha has a question there as well.
Hi, thanks so much. That was great. Really appreciate that. Question is around first podcast series. Is 6 episodes enough?
I would say so.
It's up to you. Whatever you like, 2 episodes could be enough.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Whatever you feel comfortable with. Like it doesn't have to be any, like, no, there's no expectation of episodes, whatever it is. I knew a woman, I worked with a woman for the Yellow Coach, and for the first 2 episodes, she did 2 episodes, and then that was season 1. Season 2 is 2 episodes. Like it's whatever you feel comfortable with,
I do think though that if you are doing like 6 episodes, that keep them together. So like I wouldn't have like episode 1 in June and then episode 2 in like August. I would have, like, if you are doing series, then you should have them kind of weekly, pretty much on the same day coming out, and then finish up after 6 and then get feedback and then go again. So I think it would be like, I wouldn't have them spread out too much, just because I find that even podcasts, like once they gain a following and gain a listenership, they almost can't wait. Like they're like, oh, Wednesday's today, so the podcast will be out later. So they kind of can work their week around that.
And one of the hardest things you'll do is get them to follow or subscribe to you. So that the beauty of being kind of military about that is they know, right, Thursday's a new episode out, where if they're not subscribed to you, they'll know that time. But if they are subscribed to you, they get the notification that there's a new episode out and that kind of stuff,
And so what's the gap like between season 1 and season 2? Is that, again, totally subjective? But like,
as long as you need.
Yeah, whatever you need to do.
But if you know at the end of episode 6 of season 1 when the new season will come out, tell your listeners. So if you're like, thanks a million, that's the end of season 1. We'll see you again in December for the start of season 2. Keep an eye out on socials,
Yeah. Just to go back to the example of Love Island, where there are Love Island podcasts out there where in 10 weeks, Love Island is going to be over, and that podcast will say, look, we'll see you for next season 2. Make sure to check back and follow our socials. That's all you can do, really,
Super. Thanks so much.
Cheers. Dermot, shoot there, bud.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much. This was amazing today. I guess my question is, from your experience, how have people come across the podcast? Like, is it through searching on the likes of Spotify, or did they come through social media and then go to the likes of Spotify?
I think it's definitely a mix. So when you create a podcast, you have to choose a category that your podcast is in. So if your podcast is on fishing, let's just say, you brought up fishing earlier as well. Why are we talking about fishing so much? Anyway, fishing is great. Fishing is delicious. But let's just say you choose fishing as your topic, right? And you put in your label as fishing, and then you're now under the fishing podcast category. And let's just say there's like a person who listens religiously to this fishing podcast. Spotify and Apple, they always have recommendations for new podcasts. And a lot of people, like I know myself, I'm in discovery mode some of the times when I have a long journey ahead of me, and I'm like, I want to just listen to a new podcast. And I feel like when people give me podcast recommendations and they like podcasts that I like, I listen to them, and I'm like, oh, I've discovered a new podcast. Great. So I think like even when you're typing in fishing in a category, like your podcast will also appear. So it is a search engine on podcast channels too. So it's not just like if you have 2 social media followers, you could have 2,000 listeners to your podcast. Like it's not like reflective.
Pure example is we had, I think there was like 90 followers on TikTok when we were setting up and stuff. And just to jump to say the social aspect of that is we did a clip about a Twitter campaign someone ran, and it has, I think it's 160,000 views on it now. That got us 4,000 viewers over our followers overnight.
Yeah.
Our listenership spiked massively in the States and has retained in the States because of that one clip. So it's very important to just cover all bases. You know what I mean? And social, like TikTok is class. It's the organic reach is amazing. Now, obviously the click out isn't.
No, the click out rate isn't, but the brand awareness is very high on it.
Yeah.
Someone, or Trisha just said, it's Blue Snowball is the name of the mic.
Yeah. Any other questions there, guys? No.
I think we're good.
That's it.
Cool.
Guys, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate it. And thank you for spending your lunch with us.
Yeah. I hope that we'll get a couple of podcasts out of this now.
And DM us if you're stuck at all or if you're interested. DM, do you have another question? No. What is it?
No, that was a clapping hand.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Thanks a million. Appreciate it.
There's a difference between this and this.
Guys, thanks a million. And do reach out to Public Work if you're interested in podcasting stuff.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.